Bear finds a paraplegic girl with autism, abandoned in the forest. What he did next left everyone speechless. The autumn winds whispered through the dense forests of western Montana, where the Blackfoot Valley stretched beneath the shadow of towering pines. As night descended, the temperature dropped rapidly, turning each breath into a visible mist. In this remote wilderness, where civilization seemed like a distant memory, 11-year-old Sarah Mitchell sat alone in her wheelchair, her small frame shivering against the merciless cold. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. We keep going. The special needs child rocked back and forth, her hands clasped tightly around her head, muttering words that held no meaning to anyone but herself. Her hazel eyes, usually full of innocent wonder, now darted aimlessly through the darkness, seeing everything and nothing at once. The forest loomed around her like a labyrinth of twisted branches and rustling leaves, each sound amplifying her growing distress. Nobody could tell how long she had been there. The ground around her wheelchair showed no tracks, no signs of human presence, as if she had materialized from thin air into this desolate spot. Sarah's fingers gripped the armrests of her chair until her knuckles turned white, but she remained motionless, trapped in a prison of fear and confusion. Time seemed to stand still in the forest's embrace. The occasional hoot of an owl or the scurrying of small nocturnal creatures only emphasized her isolation. Sarah's autism made her experience the world differently from others, and now, surrounded by darkness and unfamiliarity, her senses were overwhelmed. The textures of the forest, the sounds, the shadows, everything blended into a cacophony of sensations that threatened to engulf her. The temperature continued to drop as midnight approached. Sarah's thin jacket offered little protection against the autumn chill, and her body began to grow numb. Her rocking became more pronounced, a self-soothing motion that provided little comfort in the face of such overwhelming circumstances. The forest seemed to close in around her, its shadows deepening with each passing moment. Then, something changed in the rhythm of the night. A heavy rustle, different from the ambient sounds of the forest, broke through the darkness. The ground trembled slightly with each approaching step, and the air grew thick with an unmistakable presence. Sarah's rocking intensified, her body responding to the primal fear that coursed through her veins. Warm breath disturbed the cold air near her face, and Sarah felt rather than saw the massive figure that now stood before her. When she finally gathered the courage to look up, her eyes met those of a massive grizzly bear. The creature's bulk blocked out what little moonlight filtered through the canopy, its massive head lowered to study this strange human child who had wandered into its domain. Sarah's heart thundered in her chest, her hands fluttering in patterns of distress. The bear's presence was overwhelming, its size, its wild scent, the power that radiated from its every movement. Yet something unexpected happened. The bear made no aggressive move, showed no sign of threat. Instead, it remained still, watching her with what seemed like curiosity. Slowly, deliberately, the enormous creature lowered itself to the ground beside her wheelchair. Sarah's repetitive movements continued, but gradually, almost imperceptibly, they began to change. The bear's massive body radiated heat, creating a barrier against the biting cold. Its deep, steady breathing became a constant rhythm in the night, almost hypnotic in its regularity. Time passed in this strange tableau. A lost child and a wild creature sharing an unlikely moment of peace in the vast Montana wilderness. Sarah's exhausted body began to respond to the unexpected warmth and security provided by the bear's presence. Her movements became less frantic, her breathing more regular, though her mind still struggled to process this extraordinary situation. As the first hints of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, the bear stirred. It rose to its full height, shaking dew from its thick fur. Then, in a gesture that would have seemed impossible to anyone watching, It gently nudged Sarah's wheelchair with its nose. The metal frame rattled slightly, causing her to stiffen, but the bear's intent became clear as it repeated the action with careful deliberation. Sarah's mind raced with uncertainty as she watched the massive grizzly take a few steps forward, then turn to look back at her. The bear's intention was clear. It wanted her to follow. The forest stretched endlessly before them, a maze of shadows and obstacles that seemed impossible to navigate in a wheelchair, yet something in the bear's patient gaze gave her pause. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and the lingering cold of the night had left her joints stiff and aching. The wilderness around her offered no comfort, no direction home. With trembling hands, she gripped the wheels of her chair, the metal cold against her palms. The bear waited, its breath visible in the crisp morning air, watching her with an intelligence that defied explanation. As Sarah began to move forward, her wheels immediately caught on the uneven ground. Panic threatened to overwhelm her again, her breath coming in quick gasps. But before the fear could take hold, the bear was there, its massive head gently pushing against the side of her chair, helping her over the obstacle. The gesture was so careful, so deliberate, that it seemed almost practiced. The strange pair moved slowly through the forest. The bear chose paths that seemed random to Sarah's eyes, but gradually she began to notice a pattern. It avoided the densest undergrowth, selecting routes where the ground was more compact, where fallen logs had created natural bridges over dips and hollows. When they encountered particularly challenging terrain, the bear would pause, studying the obstacle before guiding her around it or helping her through. Sarah's arms ached from the effort of pushing her wheels over the rough ground. Each movement required intense concentration, her muscles straining against the unforgiving terrain. But whenever her chair became stuck, the bear was there, using its incredible strength with surprising gentleness to free her. Its massive paws, capable of felling trees, delicately cleared branches from their path. As the morning progressed, Sarah's initial terror began to transform into something else. Her autism had always made it difficult for her to connect with others, to understand their intentions and emotions. But there was something different about this creature. Its actions were clear, purposeful, without the complexity of human interaction that often overwhelmed her. The bear's presence had a steadying effect on her usually chaotic sensory world. The forest itself seemed to change as they traveled. The oppressive darkness that had surrounded her during the night gave way to filtered sunlight that created dancing patterns on the forest floor. Birds began their morning songs, their melodies mixing with the sound of wind in the trees. These sensations, which might have been overwhelming before, now seemed more manageable with the bear's steady presence beside her. They encountered a particularly challenging obstacle, a massive fallen tree trunk blocking their path. Sarah's heart sank as she realized there was no way around it. The surrounding undergrowth was too thick for her wheelchair to navigate. She began to rock back and forth, her anxiety building as she faced what seemed to be an insurmountable barrier. The bear, however, appeared undaunted. It moved forward, rising to its full height on its hind legs, a sight both terrifying and magnificent. With powerful movements, it began to work at the fallen trunk, its massive claws digging into the dead wood. The display of raw strength was awesome to behold, yet Sarah felt no fear. She watched in amazement as the bear gradually cleared a path, pushing and pulling until there was just enough space for her wheelchair to pass through. This moment marked a profound shift in Sarah's understanding. The bear wasn't just leading her randomly through the forest, it was actively problem-solving, finding ways to help her navigate obstacles that would have been impossible for her to overcome alone. Her hands, which had been constantly moving in anxious patterns, gradually stilled as she watched her unlikely guardian work. As they continued their journey, the forest began to thin slightly. The terrain became a bit more manageable, though still challenging for her wheelchair. The bear maintained its careful pace, always staying close enough to help when needed. Sarah found herself studying its movements, the way it read the landscape, its careful consideration of each obstacle they encountered. There was an intelligence in its actions that went beyond mere animal instinct. The morning sun had risen higher in the sky, warming the air around them. Sarah's clothes, damp from the night's dew, began to dry in the growing warmth. Her initial exhaustion was giving way to a determined focus as she worked with the bear to navigate the wilderness. For the first time since finding herself alone in the forest, she felt a glimmer of hope. The midday sun filtered through the canopy of leaves, casting dappled shadows that danced across Sarah's path. Her arms trembled with exhaustion, but she pressed on, following her enormous companion through the wilderness. The bear moved with surprising grace for its size, constantly checking back to ensure she was able to keep up. This strange partnership had developed its own rhythm over the hours of their journey. Sarah's mind, usually overwhelmed by the cacophony of sensory input that came with her autism, had found an unexpected focus in the repetitive motion of pushing her wheelchair forward. The consistent presence of the bear had become a grounding force, its movements predictable and reassuring in a way that few things in her world ever were. When the sensations threatened to become too much, the rough texture of the ground beneath her wheels, the varying intensities of light through the trees, the multitude of forest sounds, she could focus on the steady movement of her companion. The forest floor had begun to change subtly, the ground becoming slightly more even, though still challenging for her wheelchair. The bear seemed to move with increased purpose now, as if following a path that only it could see. Sarah noticed small signs that they were moving toward something, the way the trees were spaced farther apart, how the underbrush seemed less dense. Her guardian was not just wandering, it was leading her somewhere specific. During their journey, Sarah had begun to notice more about her unusual protector. The bear moved with a slight favor to its right side, perhaps an old injury that had healed long ago. This imperfection made the creature seem more real to her, more relatable in a way she couldn't quite explain. When it helped her navigate particularly difficult spots, she could see the careful consideration in its movements, the gentle way it used its enormous strength. They paused briefly by a small stream, where the bear waited patiently as Sarah cupped her hands to drink the crystal-clear water. The cool liquid soothed her parched throat, and for a moment she caught her reflection in the stream's surface. Her own face looked back at her, changed somehow by the experiences of the past hours. The fear that had gripped her through the night had given way to something else, a determination she didn't know she possessed. As they resumed their journey, Sarah began to notice other changes in their surroundings. Bird songs became more frequent, their melodies carrying through the trees with increasing clarity. The air seemed different too, carrying hints of wood smoke, a scent so faint that at first she thought she might be imagining it. But the bear's behavior confirmed her observation. It moved with renewed purpose, its steps more deliberate, its checks on her progress more frequent. The terrain continued to challenge them. Each root and rock required careful navigation, and Sarah's arms ached from the constant effort of maneuvering her wheelchair. But she had learned to read the bear's signals now, the way it would pause before a particularly difficult spot, how it would indicate the best path with subtle movements of its massive head. They had developed an unspoken communication that transcended the usual barriers Sarah faced in understanding others. As they crested a small rise, the bear suddenly stopped. Its posture changed, becoming more alert, its nose testing the air. Sarah felt her heart rate increase, not from fear this time, but from anticipation. Something was different about this spot. The forest had thinned enough that shafts of sunlight broke through more frequently, creating pools of golden light on the forest floor. The bear moved forward carefully now, its movements more measured. Sarah followed, her wheels finding slightly easier passage on the gradually leveling ground. The air had definitely changed. The scent of wood smoke was stronger now, carrying with it promises of human presence. But instead of retreating, as any wild creature normally would, the bear continued forward with clear purpose. Through a gap in the trees ahead, Sarah caught a glimpse of something that made her heart leap: a clearing. The bear paused at this threshold between forest and open space, turning to look at her with those intelligent eyes that had guided her through the wilderness. In that moment, Sarah felt a surge of emotion she couldn't quite name. This creature, this powerful force of nature, had chosen to help her when she was at her most vulnerable. The clearing beckoned ahead of them, and as they moved closer, Sarah began to make out more details through the thinning trees. The shape of a structure began to emerge. A cabin, its wooden walls weathered by years of Montana seasons. A thin trail of smoke rose from its chimney, curling up into the autumn sky. The bear's behavior shifted subtly, its massive form becoming more alert, more cautious, yet still maintaining its protective stance near Sarah's wheelchair. The cabin stood before them, a weathered sentinel in the clearing. Its wooden walls told stories of countless seasons, the roof dusted with fallen autumn leaves. Sarah's hands gripped her wheelchair tightly as she took in the sight. The bear, still beside her, let out a low, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through the air, not threatening, but purposeful. The smoke rising from the chimney danced in the morning breeze, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of a wood fire. Signs of life surrounded the structure. Chopped wood stacked neatly against one wall, garden tools leaning against the porch. A well-worn path leading to what appeared to be a small vegetable garden. This wasn't just a shelter, it was someone's home. Sarah's autism had always made new situations overwhelming, but something about this moment felt different. Perhaps it was the bear's steady presence beside her, or maybe the exhaustion from their long journey through the forest, but she found herself studying the details of the scene with an unusual clarity. The texture of the rough-hewn logs, the pattern of the smoke against the sky, the sound of wind chimes hanging from the porch eave. Each sensation registered without overwhelming her. The bear moved forward with careful steps, guiding Sarah's wheelchair along the clearing's edge. As they approached, a sound from the cabin made them both pause, the creak of a door opening. Sarah's body tensed instinctively, her hands fluttering in familiar patterns of anxiety. The bear, however, remained calm, its massive form a reassuring presence beside her. The cabin's door swung open, and a man stepped onto the porch. He was tall and weathered, dressed in flannel and denim, with a graying beard and kind eyes that widened in astonishment at the sight before him. In his hands, he held an axe that he'd clearly been about to use for his morning wood chopping. The tool fell from his grip, landing with a dull thud on the wooden porch. "Good Lord above," he whispered, his voice carrying clearly across the clearing. His eyes darted between Sarah and the bear, trying to make sense of the impossible scene before him. A young girl in a wheelchair, emerging from the wilderness with one of the forest's most formidable predators as her guardian. The bear let out another low sound, different from before. Sarah, who had spent hours learning to read her companion's signals, recognized it as reassuring rather than threatening. The man on the porch remained frozen, his hands raised slightly, showing he meant no harm. His eyes met Sarah's, and something in his expression shifted from shock to deep concern. "Hey there, little one," he called softly, his voice gentle and steady despite the extraordinary situation. "Are you okay?" He took a careful step forward, then stopped, clearly aware of the massive grizzly standing protectively near Sarah's wheelchair. Sarah's response was to rock slightly in her chair, her usual way of processing overwhelming situations. The bear watched the man intently, but made no aggressive moves. Instead, it did something remarkable. It nudged Sarah's wheelchair forward, ever so gently, toward the cabin. The man's expression softened with understanding. "Well, I'll be," he murmured, watching the bear's careful interaction with the child. "You've been helping her, haven't you, big fellow?" His voice carried a note of wonder and recognition, as if he'd just witnessed something he'd always suspected but never quite believed possible. Slowly, carefully, he descended the porch steps. His movements were deliberate, non-threatening, as he approached the unusual pair. The bear watched him closely but remained calm, its behavior suggesting this wasn't their first encounter. Sarah's rocking slowed as she observed the interaction between man and beast, her keen mind picking up on subtle details others might have missed. "I'm James," the man said softly, now close enough for Sarah to see the kindness in his weathered face. "And I think I know this old bear. He's been around these parts for years." He knelt down to Sarah's eye level, maintaining a respectful distance. "Would you like to come inside? You look like you could use some warm food and rest." The bear moved slightly, positioning itself so that it formed a triangle with Sarah and James. Its behavior was protective, yet accepting, as if it had completed some unspoken mission. Sarah looked between the man and the bear, her mind processing this new development. The journey through the forest had changed something in her. She felt different, stronger somehow, despite her exhaustion. James's cabin was warm and welcoming, filled with the rich aroma of wood smoke and pine. As he carefully helped Sarah navigate her wheelchair up the gently sloping ramp he had built years ago, the bear remained at the edge of the clearing, watching intently. The man's movements were slow and deliberate, giving Sarah time to process each new sensation. "I built this ramp for my sister, Emma," James explained softly, noticing Sarah's curious glance at the wooden structure. "She used to visit me here before she moved to Seattle." His voice carried a gentle warmth that somehow made the transition less overwhelming for Sarah. Inside, the cabin was a testament to simple living. Handcrafted furniture, woven blankets, and walls lined with books and photographs. The bear's deep grunt from outside drew their attention. Through the window, they could see it settling down near the porch, like a sentinel standing guard. James shook his head in wonder. "That old fellow? I've known him for almost 7 years now. Never seen him act quite like this, though." He moved toward the kitchen area, keeping his movements predictable and calm. Sarah's eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail. Unlike the chaotic sensory overload she usually experienced in new places, the cabin's environment felt somehow manageable. The wooden walls seemed to absorb sound rather than reflect it, creating a peaceful atmosphere that helped calm her racing thoughts. Her fingers traced the smooth wooden armrests of her wheelchair, finding comfort in their familiar texture. "You must be hungry," James said, pulling out some homemade bread and honey. "I keep bees, you see. The honey helps sweeten the deal when trading with folks in town." He placed the food on a low table within Sarah's reach, along with a glass of clear water. "Take your time. No need to rush." As Sarah cautiously reached for the bread, James continued talking in his gentle, steady voice. "That bear, he's different from the others. Started coming around after I helped him one winter. He had a nasty injury, caught in some old barbed wire. Could have turned mean, but he didn't. Let me help him, clear as day, understanding what I was trying to do." Through the window, they could see the bear still maintaining its vigilant watch. Its massive form was a stark contrast to the peaceful domestic scene inside the cabin. Sarah took small bites of the honey-drizzled bread, her body gradually relaxing in the warmth of the shelter. James moved about the cabin with practiced ease, gathering blankets and setting water to boil for tea. "You know," he continued, measuring his words carefully, "animals out here, they're smarter than most folks give them credit for. They understand things we might not expect them to." He glanced at Sarah, noting how she seemed to calm whenever she looked at the bear outside. "Sometimes they see things we can't, sense when someone needs help." The morning light filtered through the windows, creating warm patches on the wooden floor. Sarah's wheelchair cast long shadows, and she watched them shift as the sun moved higher in the sky. James busied himself preparing a more substantial meal, the domestic sounds of cooking creating a soothing backdrop to their shared silence. "I've seen him watching the road sometimes," James mused, stirring something that smelled wonderfully of herbs and vegetables. "Like he's keeping an eye on things, never bothers anyone, just observes. But this," he gestured to Sarah and then to the bear outside, "this is something special." Sarah's attention was drawn to a collection of photographs on one wall. Among them was a picture of a younger James standing next to a woman in a wheelchair. Emma, presumably. The image showed them both smiling, the forest serving as their backdrop. Something about the photograph seemed to resonate with Sarah, and her rocking, which had been constant since entering the cabin, began to slow. Outside, the bear shifted its position, moving to face the forest. Its behavior remained alert but relaxed, as if it had found the perfect balance between vigilance and rest. James watched it through the window, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know, in all my years out here, I've learned that the forest has its own way of taking care of things, its own kind of wisdom." The warmth of the cabin, the gentle sounds of James's movements, and the steady presence of the bear outside began to create a cocoon of safety around Sarah. Her usual sensory defenses, always on high alert, started to lower slightly. The trauma of the night in the forest began to fade, replaced by something new, a feeling of being understood, even without words. James continued his quiet work in the kitchen, occasionally glancing at Sarah to ensure she was comfortable. His movements were practiced and smooth, creating a rhythm that Sarah found soothing. Through the window, the bear remained a constant presence, its massive form a reminder of the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this place. As the afternoon light filled the cabin with a golden glow, James sat in his worn leather chair, his eyes fixed on the bear outside. Sarah had finished her meal and was now wrapped in a soft blanket, her wheelchair positioned near the window where she could keep watch on her extraordinary guardian. The atmosphere in the cabin had settled into a comfortable quiet, broken only by the occasional crackle of the fireplace. "You know," James began, his voice carrying the weight of memories, "that bear out there, he's got a story of his own." He reached for an old leather-bound journal on the nearby shelf, its pages worn with use. "I've been keeping track of him over the years. Started right after that first winter when I found him caught in that wire." Sarah's attention shifted to the journal as James carefully opened it, revealing pages filled with neat handwriting and detailed sketches. There were drawings of the bear in different seasons, notes about its behavior, and pressed leaves marking the passing of time. The care and attention in the documentation spoke of a deep connection between the man and the creature. "See here," James pointed to a particular sketch, dated several years back. "This was when I first noticed something different about him. Most bears, they stick to themselves, but this one, he seemed to understand things. Started showing up when storms were coming, like he was checking on the cabin." His weathered finger traced the careful lines of the drawing, showing the bear's distinctive features. Outside, as if aware it was being discussed, the bear shifted its position, its massive head turning to scan the tree line. Sarah watched its movements with intense focus, her hands now still in her lap. The connection she felt with the creature seemed to deepen with each passing hour, as if their shared journey through the forest had created an unbreakable bond. James continued turning the pages of his journal, each entry revealing more about the unique relationship between man and bear. "There was this time, about 2 years ago, when he led me to a fallen hiker. Fella had twisted his ankle badly, couldn't walk. The bear just stood there waiting until I followed him. Never seen anything like it." He shook his head, still amazed by the memory. Sarah's eyes widened at this revelation, her mind making connections. Her own experience wasn't an isolated incident. This bear had a history of helping those in need. James noticed her reaction and nodded slowly. Yeah, he's special, all right. Got a way of knowing when someone needs help. Been watching over this part of the forest like a guardian. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the trees outside, and the bear's fur gleamed with hints of gold and brown. Its presence had become a comfort rather than a source of fear, both for Sarah and for the cabin's inhabitants. James set the journal aside and leaned forward in his chair, his voice taking on a thoughtful tone. My sister Emma. She always said animals could sense things we couldn't. She worked with therapy horses before her condition worsened. He gestured to another photograph on the wall, showing Emma surrounded by horses. Said they could read people's hearts, know exactly what they needed. Guess she was right about that. Sarah's attention moved between the journal, the photographs, and the bear outside, her mind piecing together this tapestry of interconnected lives. The cabin itself seemed to hold these stories within its walls, tales of healing, understanding, and unexpected connections. James watched her process this information, recognizing the thoughtful look in her eyes. You know what's remarkable? He said softly. In all these years, he's never once acted aggressively. Even when other bears come around during salmon season, he keeps his distance, watches out for the cabin. It's like he's chosen a different path from his kind. James stood slowly, moving to add another log to the fire. The warmth from the fireplace filled the room, creating a cozy atmosphere that seemed to embrace them all. Through the window, they could see the bear methodically patrolling the perimeter of the clearing, its movements both powerful and gentle. Its behavior spoke of a deep understanding of its role in this unique arrangement. Sometimes, James continued, settling back into his chair, the most extraordinary things happen in the simplest places. Out here in the wilderness, away from all the noise and chaos, you start to see things differently. Start to understand that there's more to this world than what we think we know. He glanced at Sarah, noting how she had stopped rocking entirely, her attention fully focused on the bear's movements outside. The late afternoon cast long shadows across the cabin floor as Sarah found herself drawn to the collection of photographs on James's wall. Each image told a story, moments frozen in time that spoke of connection and understanding. Her fingers traced the air in front of a particular photo, showing James tending to what appeared to be the same bear, its injured paw wrapped in bandages. James noticed her interest and wheeled her closer to the wall. That was the beginning, he explained softly. Found him caught in that wire, angry and scared, but something in his eyes. He paused, choosing his words carefully. He looked at me like he knew I wanted to help. Stayed still while I worked, even though he must have been in terrible pain. Outside, the bear had settled into a comfortable position, its massive form silhouetted against the darkening sky. Sarah's usual anxiety about approaching darkness seemed less intense now, tempered by the safety she felt in this unexpected sanctuary. Her hands, which typically moved in constant patterns of distress, now rested quietly in her lap as she absorbed the peaceful atmosphere. You know, James continued, moving to his desk where he kept more recent journals, he started coming back after that. Not for food or shelter, but almost like he was checking on things. He opened a newer journal, revealing more detailed observations. Started noticing how he'd appear when things weren't quite right, before storms, when other animals were around, when strangers passed through. Sarah's attention shifted between the journals and the bear outside, her mind making connections that words couldn't express. Her autism had always made it difficult to understand the complex social world around her, but here, in this simple cabin, with its extraordinary guardian, things seemed clearer somehow. James watched her reactions carefully, noting how she responded to different stimuli. Reminds me of what Emma used to say about her therapy horses. Said sometimes the animals could reach places in people's hearts that other humans couldn't. He smiled softly at the memory. She'd have understood this right away, this connection you've got with him. The bear's presence outside had become a constant comfort, its steady breathing visible in the cooling air. Sarah's wheelchair was positioned perfectly to keep watch on her protector, and she found herself studying its movements with increasing understanding. Every shift, every alert turn of its head seemed to carry meaning. "You know what's remarkable?" James said, pulling up a chair beside her. "He's never brought anyone here before. Guided that lost hiker close enough to find help, sure, but never right to the cabin." He glanced at Sarah with gentle curiosity. "Must have seen something special in you, something that needed more than just directions out of the woods." The cabin's interior had grown darker as evening approached, but neither James nor Sarah moved to turn on the lights yet. The natural dimming of the day felt right somehow, matching the thoughtful mood that had settled over them. The bear's outline remained visible through the window, a faithful sentinel in the gathering dusk. Sarah's hands began to move again, but differently now, not in her usual patterns of anxiety, but in gentle motions that seemed to mirror the bear's movements outside. James watched, fascinated, as she appeared to be developing her own way of connecting with their unusual guardian. "Sometimes," James said softly, "the forest brings us exactly what we need, even if we don't know we need it." He reached for a well-worn blanket and draped it gently over Sarah's shoulders. "That bear out there, he's been watching over this part of the woods for years now. Never expected him to bring someone straight to my door, but then again, the wilderness has its own wisdom." The sound of the bear's movement drew their attention. It had stood up and was scanning the tree line with focused attention. Its behavior wasn't alarming but alert, as if it had sensed something approaching. James recognized this posture from his years of observation, and his expression turned thoughtful. "He's got that look again," James murmured, more to himself than to Sarah. "Same look he had when he found that lost hiker. Like he knows something's about to happen." He moved to add more wood to the fire, keeping his movements calm and deliberate despite the growing anticipation in the air. The evening air had grown still, carrying sounds from deep within the forest. The bear's alert posture drew both Sarah and James's attention to the tree line, where shadows had begun to lengthen. Something was approaching, the distant sound of voices carried on the wind, growing gradually clearer. Sarah's body tensed instinctively, her hands beginning their familiar pattern of movement, but the bear's calm vigilance seemed to reassure her. James moved closer to the window, his experienced eyes scanning the darkening forest. The voices were becoming more distinct now, calling out with increasing urgency, "Sarah! Sarah Mitchell!" The calls echoed through the trees, filled with worry and hope. James glanced at Sarah, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Sounds like someone's been looking for you, little one." His voice remained steady and calm, aware of how the sudden change might affect her. The bear outside remained in its protective position, but its posture had shifted slightly, as if it too recognized the significance of the moment. Through the trees, flashlight beams began to dance, cutting through the gathering dusk. The bear watched their approach with studied intensity, but made no move to retreat. Years of interaction with James had taught it to distinguish between threat and necessity, and now it seemed to understand that these newcomers were important to its young charge. "Sarah!" The voices were closer now, and Sarah's hands fluttered more rapidly. James recognized the signs of increasing anxiety and spoke softly, maintaining the calm atmosphere they had built throughout the day. "It's okay, Sarah. Remember how the bear brought you here? Brought you to safety? These people are part of that journey too." The bear's behavior was fascinating to James. Instead of disappearing into the forest as it typically would when strangers approached, it remained visible, almost as if it were waiting to ensure the proper conclusion to its mission. Its massive form stood as a silent guardian between the approaching search party and the cabin. The flashlight beams finally broke through the last line of trees, revealing a small group of searchers. Their expressions shifted from determination to astonishment as they took in the scene before them. The cabin in the clearing, the massive grizzly bear standing calmly nearby, and through the window, the small figure they had been searching for. "Over here," one of the searchers called out, his voice cracking with emotion. "We've found her!" The bear turned its head toward the cabin one last time, its eyes meeting Sarah's through the window. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding that transcended the usual boundaries between human and animal. Sarah's hands stilled momentarily, her gaze fixed on her protector. James watched this silent exchange with wonder, recognizing the depth of the connection that had formed between the unlikely pair. He had seen many remarkable things in his years in the wilderness, but this was something entirely different. The search party approached cautiously, their movements slowing as they noticed the bear, but the creature's calm demeanor and protective rather than aggressive stance caused them to pause in amazement rather than fear. Among them was a woman who stepped forward, her uniform identifying her as a park ranger. "This is incredible," she breathed, taking in the scene. "We've been searching since dawn when the call came in." Her trained eyes moved between the bear, the cabin, and Sarah's figure visible through the window. "How is this possible?" James moved to the cabin door, opening it slowly while keeping his movements deliberate and calm. "She's safe," he called out softly. The bear brought her here. He could see the disbelief on their faces, the struggle to comprehend what they were witnessing. "I know it sounds impossible, but I've known this bear for years. He's different, special." The bear remained in its position, watching the unfolding scene with what appeared to be intelligent interest. Its behavior continued to defy everything the searchers knew about wild animals, particularly grizzlies. Instead of displaying aggression or fear, it maintained its protective stance while allowing the humans to approach. Sarah's eyes darted between the bear and the approaching searchers, her body rocking slightly as she processed the changing situation. But there was something different about her movement now. It wasn't the frantic rocking of distress, but rather a gentler motion, almost like she was soothing herself through the transition. "I've been documenting this bear's behavior for years," James explained to the astounded search party. "He's shown remarkable intelligence, even helped others before. But this," he gestured to Sarah and then to the bear, "this is beyond anything I've seen. He didn't just guide her here. He protected her through the night, helped her navigate the forest in her wheelchair. It's extraordinary." The park ranger, who introduced herself as Rachel Thompson, approached the cabin with measured steps, her experienced eyes never leaving the bear. 20 years of working in Montana's wilderness had taught her much about wildlife behavior, but nothing had prepared her for this. The grizzly's demeanor defied everything she knew about these powerful creatures. "I've never seen anything like this in all my years of service," Rachel said softly to James as they stood in the doorway. "When we got the call about a missing child, especially one with special needs," she paused, watching Sarah through the window, "we feared the worst, but this is remarkable." The bear remained in its sentinel position, occasionally glancing between Sarah and the search party, as if ensuring that these newcomers posed no threat to its young charge. Its behavior continued to amaze even the most experienced members of the search team, who kept a respectful distance while documenting this extraordinary scene. Inside the cabin, Sarah's attention remained fixed on the bear, her hands moving in gentle patterns that seemed to mirror its calm vigilance. James had noticed how her movements had changed throughout the day, from the frantic gestures of fear to these more purposeful motions. It was as if she had found a new way to communicate, inspired by her unusual protector. "There's something else you should see," James said to Rachel, retrieving his journals. "This bear, he's been a guardian of sorts in these woods for years. He opened the books, showing her the detailed observations, the sketches, the documented instances of the bear's unusual behavior. What happened with Sarah isn't an isolated incident. He's helped others before, though never quite like this. Rachel studied the journals with growing amazement, her professional skepticism giving way to wonder. "This needs to be documented properly," she said, her voice filled with quiet awe. "This could change how we understand wildlife behavior, especially regarding interaction with special needs individuals." The search team had begun setting up a temporary base in the clearing, their movements careful and respectful of both the bear and the delicate situation. Among them was a medical professional, Dr. Emily Chen, who specialized in working with autistic children. She watched Sarah through the window, noting her behavior with professional interest. "May I come in?" Dr. Chen asked softly. "I'd like to check on Sarah, but I don't want to disturb the remarkable calm she seems to have found here." James nodded, and she entered the cabin with quiet, deliberate movements that reminded him of the bear's careful approach earlier that day. Sarah's response to Dr. Chen's presence was surprising. Instead of the typical withdrawal James had observed when others approached, she maintained her composed state, her attention still divided between the bear outside and her new surroundings. Dr. Chen knelt beside her wheelchair, speaking in gentle tones. "Sarah, you've had quite an adventure," she said, her voice warm and understanding, "and it seems you've made an extraordinary friend." She glanced at the bear, which had turned its head toward the window, as if aware it was being discussed. "Would you like to tell me about him?" For the first time since arriving at the cabin, Sarah made a sound, not words, but a soft humming that seemed to carry meaning. Her hands moved in patterns that Dr. Chen recognized as a form of communication. And to everyone's amazement, the bear outside shifted its position in what appeared to be response to her movements. "Remarkable, Doctor," Chen whispered. "She's developed a unique form of communication, possibly inspired by her interaction with the bear. This could be groundbreaking for understanding how children with autism connect with their environment." James shared more of his observations from the day, how Sarah had gradually calmed in the bear's presence, how she had shown unprecedented focus and connection. Rachel and Dr. Chen listened intently, their professional expertise adding new layers of understanding to the extraordinary events. The bear seems to have instinctively provided what many autism therapy programs strive to create, Dr. Chen explained. A safe, predictable presence that offers support without overwhelming demands. The consistent, calm behavior, the protective but non-intrusive stance. It's almost as if he naturally understood exactly what she needed. Outside, the light had begun to fade into evening, casting long shadows across the clearing. The bear remained steadfast, its massive form a silhouette against the darkening forest. Its continued presence, despite the growing number of people, spoke of its deep commitment to ensuring Sarah's well-being. As the evening settled over the clearing, the atmosphere in and around the cabin had transformed into something both professional and deeply personal. The search team worked efficiently but quietly, respecting the delicate balance that had been established. Through it all, the bear maintained its vigilant presence, its behavior continuing to astound even the most experienced wilderness experts. Dr. Chen had been working patiently with Sarah, observing the unique way she had begun to interact with her environment. "This is unprecedented," she explained to James and Rachel. "The trauma of being lost in the forest should have caused severe distress, yet she's showing remarkable stability. The bear's presence seems to have created a bridge between her world and ours." Sarah's attention remained divided between the bear outside and the gentle activities within the cabin. Her hands moved in those new, meaningful patterns they had all noticed, and each time they did, the bear would shift slightly, acknowledging her movements with subtle responses of its own. This silent dialogue between them fascinated everyone who witnessed it. "We'll need to prepare for her departure soon," Rachel said softly, careful to maintain the calm atmosphere. Her family has been notified, and they're waiting anxiously, but we need to handle this transition carefully." She glanced at the bear, which seemed to be listening to their conversation. "We've never dealt with a situation quite like this." James retrieved his latest journal, adding fresh observations about the day's extraordinary events. "The bear's behavior suggests a level of emotional intelligence we never fully understood before," he noted, sketching the scene before him. "It's not just about protection. There's a genuine connection here, an understanding that goes beyond instinct." Dr. Chen nodded in agreement. "In my work with autistic children, we often see unique bonds form with therapy animals, but this is different. This wild creature somehow recognized her needs and adapted its behavior accordingly. It's as if it innately understood how to provide the perfect environment for her to feel secure." Outside, the bear had begun a slow, methodical patrol of the clearing's perimeter, its movements precise and purposeful. The search team watched in fascination as it maintained a perfect distance, close enough to keep watch, but far enough to make everyone comfortable. Its behavior continued to challenge everything they thought they knew about wild animals. Sarah's wheelchair had been positioned near the window, allowing her to track the bear's movements. Her rocking had almost completely ceased, replaced by a calm alertness that Dr. Chen noted was extremely rare in high-stress situations. The bear's presence seemed to anchor her, providing a focus point that helped her process the changing circumstances around her. "Look at how she follows his movements," Dr. Chen observed. "There's a rhythm to it, a pattern they've developed together. It's as if they've created their own language in the short time they've been together." She made notes in her professional journal, documenting this remarkable case of interspecies connection. James shared more from his years of observing the bear. "He's always shown unusual intelligence, but this goes beyond anything I've seen before. The way he helped her through the forest, clearing paths for her wheelchair, waiting when she needed rest, it shows not just intelligence, but empathy." Rachel had been coordinating with her team, preparing for the delicate process of transition. "We'll need to handle the separation carefully," she said, "both for Sarah's sake and to honor this extraordinary connection that's formed. This bear has done something remarkable. He's not just protected her, he's helped her find a new way to connect with the world." The bear's movements suddenly became more focused, and it approached the cabin with deliberate steps. Everyone watched in amazement as it came closer than it had since the search team's arrival. It stopped near Sarah's window, looking directly at her with what could only be described as gentle intelligence. Sarah's response was immediate and surprising. Her hands moved in a new pattern, more defined than before, and for the first time that day she smiled. It was a small expression, but its significance wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The bear responded with a soft grunt, a sound that seemed to carry recognition and understanding. The night had settled gently over the Montana wilderness, and the clearing around James's cabin was softly illuminated by the careful placement of the search team's lights. Inside, preparations were being made for Sarah's departure, each step thoughtfully considered to maintain the remarkable calm that had descended over the scene. Dr. Chen had been quietly observing the continued interaction between Sarah and the bear, making notes that she knew would challenge conventional understanding of both wildlife behavior and autism therapy. "What we're witnessing here," she explained to James and Rachel, "isn't just a story of survival. It's a demonstration of connection that transcends our normal boundaries of understanding." The bear had maintained its position near Sarah's window, occasionally moving in what appeared to be response to her gestures. Its behavior had become a source of fascination for the entire search team, who documented every movement, every interaction, with quiet amazement. Even in the growing darkness, its presence remained a source of comfort rather than concern. "In all my years of wildlife study," Rachel said, reviewing James's journals again, "I've never seen anything quite like this. The way this bear has acted, choosing to help, showing such careful understanding of human vulnerability. It challenges everything we thought we knew about wild animals. Sarah's new patterns of movement had become more defined throughout the evening. Her hands would rise and fall in gentle motions that seemed to mirror the bear's breathing, creating a silent dialogue that everyone in the cabin could sense but not quite understand. It was as if she had found a new language, one that bridged the gap between her world and the one outside. James had been adding final entries to his journal, his practiced hand capturing the extraordinary events of the day. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when my sister Emma used to visit, she always said that animals could sense things we couldn't, that they could see past our ordinary ways of communicating to something deeper." He glanced at Sarah, then at the bear. "I never fully understood what she meant until today." The bear's behavior continued to astound, even as the preparations for departure moved forward. It showed no sign of anxiety despite the increased activity, maintaining its protective yet gentle presence. Its eyes followed the movements within the cabin, showing particular attention whenever someone approached Sarah. Dr. Chen had been carefully documenting Sarah's responses throughout the evening. "The patterns she's developed," she explained, "they're not just random movements, they're purposeful, communicative. It's as if the bear's presence has helped her find a new way to express herself, to connect with the world around her." Outside, the bear suddenly shifted position, moving with purpose toward the edge of the clearing. Everyone watched as it disappeared briefly into the forest, only to return moments later carrying something in its mouth. With careful movements, it approached Sarah's window and gently placed what appeared to be a pine branch on the ground, a gesture that seemed almost ceremonial. Sarah's response was immediate and touching. Her hands moved in a new pattern, and for the second time that day, she smiled. The bear's answering grunt was soft, almost tender, a sound that seemed to carry volumes of unspoken understanding. Dr. Chen quickly noted this interaction, recognizing its significance in the context of autism therapy. "This kind of symbolic communication," she whispered, "this is breakthrough territory. The bear isn't just protecting her, it's actively engaging in meaningful exchange. The implications for our understanding of both wildlife behavior and autism are extraordinary." Rachel had been coordinating with her team, ensuring everything was in place for a smooth transition. "We've arranged for a special transport," she explained quietly to James. "One that will allow Sarah to maintain visual contact with the clearing as long as possible. After what we've witnessed here, we want to honor this connection in every way we can." The bear's continued presence, its careful attention to Sarah's every movement, had created an atmosphere of reverence in and around the cabin. Even the most experienced members of the search team found themselves moved by the depth of understanding displayed between this wild creature and the young girl who had found such unexpected comfort in its presence. The moment of departure approached with the gentleness of dawn, breaking over the Montana wilderness. The search team had arranged everything with extraordinary care, mindful of the unique bond they had witnessed throughout the day. Sarah remained calm in her wheelchair, her hands moving in those now familiar patterns that seemed to speak directly to her unusual guardian. The bear had taken up a position near the cabin's entrance, its massive form silhouetted against the forest backdrop. Its behavior continued to defy natural instincts. Instead of retreating from the increased human activity, it maintained its vigilant presence, watching over the proceedings with what could only be described as conscious awareness. "This story will be remembered," Rachel said softly to James as they stood in the doorway, "not just as a remarkable rescue, but as a moment that changes how we understand the relationship between humans and wildlife." She held James's latest journal entry in her hands, the pages filled with detailed observations of the day's extraordinary events. Dr. Chen had been working quietly with Sarah, preparing her for the transition ahead. "The connection she's formed," she explained to the others. "It's not just emotional, it's transformative. She's found a way to communicate that bridges two worlds." This bear somehow knew exactly what she needed and provided it without hesitation. James moved thoughtfully around his cabin, gathering a few items he wanted to share with Sarah's family. Copies of his observations, sketches of the bear, and a small piece of the pine branch the bear had brought earlier. "Some things in life defy explanation," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes we just have to accept the miracle for what it is." The bear's behavior as the departure time drew near became even more remarkable. It began a slow, deliberate movement around the clearing, as if patrolling one last time, ensuring all was safe. Its path brought it closer to the cabin with each circuit, until finally it stood directly before Sarah's wheelchair. Sarah's response to this final approach was extraordinary. Her hands moved in a new pattern, more definite than before, and her eyes met those of the bear with perfect clarity. The massive creature lowered its head slightly, releasing a soft sound that seemed to carry years of wilderness wisdom. Everyone present felt the weight of this moment, a connection that transcended the natural order of things. "In all my years of studying wildlife behavior," Rachel noted, quickly documenting the interaction, "I've never seen anything like this. It's as if they've developed their own language, their own understanding that goes beyond our scientific explanations." Dr. Chen watched with professional amazement as Sarah remained calm throughout the preparations for departure. "This experience has opened new possibilities in how we understand autism and connection," she observed. "Sometimes the most profound breakthroughs come from the most unexpected sources." As the transport vehicle was finally ready, Sarah's wheelchair was carefully moved toward it. The bear watched this process with intense focus, moving parallel to their path, but maintaining a respectful distance. Its behavior continued to show remarkable awareness of the situation's delicacy. James stood at his cabin door, his journal clutched in his hands, watching as this extraordinary chapter came to a close. "You know," he said to Rachel and Dr. Chen, "that bear has been a guardian of these woods for years, but today it became something more. It showed us that there are depths to nature's wisdom that we're only beginning to understand." The final moment of farewell was approached with gentle reverence. The bear remained visible at the edge of the clearing as Sarah was secured in the transport. Her hands moved one last time in those special patterns, and the bear responded with a deep, soft sound that seemed to echo through the forest. As the vehicle began to move, the bear did something that left even the most seasoned wilderness experts in awe. It rose briefly on its hind legs, its full, magnificent height displayed against the forest backdrop, as if offering a final farewell to the young girl who had shared in its extraordinary wisdom. The story of the bear that defied nature to protect a lost child spread far beyond the Montana wilderness, touching hearts and challenging preconceptions about the boundaries between humans and wildlife. But for those who witnessed it firsthand, James in his cabin, Rachel with her wildlife expertise, Dr. Chen with her understanding of autism, it remained a testament to the profound mysteries that still exist in the natural world. And deep in the forest, a remarkable bear continued its vigilant watch over the wilderness, carrying with it the memory of a connection that had transcended the ordinary boundaries between human and animal, leaving an indelible mark on all who witnessed this extraordinary tale of understanding and protection. Dear listeners, we invite you to share in the wonder of Sarah and her remarkable guardian's story. This tale of unexpected connection and profound understanding reminds us that nature holds mysteries we are only beginning to comprehend. If this story has touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary narratives that explore the depths of human-animal connections. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video. Together, we can celebrate these remarkable moments that challenge our understanding of the natural world. Stay tuned for more incredible stories that remind us of the magic that exists in unexpected places.